So the King of the North has made his way south, but a new Queen of the North has entered office. After Andy Burnham took up the role of Labour leader and Prime Minister last month, voters returned to the polls yet again last Friday in Greater Manchester to elect a new mayor. The results saw Labour decisively hold the mayoralty, earning well over double the first preference votes that Reform did in second place. But you might be thinking, why does it really matter who is Greater Manchester Mayor if you're in other parts of England, in Scotland, or even in Wales? Well, this mayoral by-election can be used cautiously with a pinch of salt as a way to sort of gauge how British politics is changing in the short term. I'll break it down for you in three main points. We'll look at if Labour is benefiting from a bounce in support since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister. We'll explore how this election result shows the right wing of British politics is splintering and why that could be an issue for parties on the right like Reform. As Restore Britain, that new party continues to attract voters. Finally, we'll assess what seems to be a downturn for the Greens after the great success that they had in the northwest of England at the Gorton and Denton by-election. This episode is part of my series Britain 101. Do consider subscribing so you don't miss future episodes. Before we get into all of that though, you might not realise how big of an election this really was. The Greater Manchester Mayor serves over 2 million voters in total. That's the highest number for any mayor outside of London. Not only that, but two of our recent Prime Ministers have used their own mayoral experience as a springboard to get into that top job as Prime Minister, of course, Boris Johnson and now Andy Burnham. More importantly though, mayors across England are soon going to have a lot more power to work with. The new Prime Minister has outlined how he plans to give regional mayors a share of the money earned from income tax to invest into their own local communities. On top of that, regional mayors like the new Mayor of Greater Manchester will be invited to take part in meetings at number 10 North. That's the new northern branch of the Prime Minister's office, which Burnham will work in at least once a week with the aim of it to sort of spread economic power across all of Britain. So let's get into the results. Was there a Burnham bounce? That's the catchy name that's been given to the new Prime Minister's honeymoon period in office, where a new leader enjoys a high approval rating and a pause in backlash from their political opponents. That's until the hard choices come along and it all very, very quickly fades away. Labour candidate Bev Craig undeniably had a strong turnout for them, earning 45% of people's first preference votes. When you add people's second preference votes as well, it actually works out that Craig got nearly double the votes that Reform's Sian Astley managed. Regardless though, we can't jump to conclusions here. Other factors played a role in Labour's success as well. For example, Reform, the closest competitor in the by-election, had to send a lot of its resources away from the mayoral campaign in Greater Manchester to Nigel Farage's constituency of Clacton, after he himself called a by-election there, and we all know how that's going. In fact, if we compare this time around to Andy Burnham's victory in the 2024 mayoral election, Bev Craig won this time with a vote share 16.3 percentage points lower than 2 years ago. However, Craig's victory here by quite a margin might suggest that voters, especially those who would usually support more progressive parties, are perhaps more willing to entrust Burnham's Labour with their votes at this early stage, and perhaps even to track some votes from Reform as well. In fact, let's turn to Reform's performance at this by-election. They were the party, after all, that got second place. They took 20% of people's first preference votes in total. Except Reform could have probably performed a lot better here had the parties on the right unified behind them. Instead, Restore Britain, a new party led by former Reform MP Rupert Lowe, and the Conservatives as well alongside, both ran in this by-election, and they attracted around 8% and 7% of the vote respectively. What stands out there is that Restore outperformed the Tories here. If they continue at this current trajectory, then Farage and his party will face a lot more pressure to fight for voters who are switching to other right-wing parties like Restore. The Reform leader will have to appease would-be Restore voters while also ensuring it doesn't alienate any of its current Reform voters as well. That could be problematic for Reform if this is reflected in a general election, for example. Say Reform would typically attract 30% of the voters, but Restore attract 10% of those Reform voters. It diminishes their total tally and would give way to another party, leaving both Reform and Restore at a loss. There are also dark implications here for the Conservative Party. To be outperformed by both Reform and the insurgent Restore Britain leaves them at the wayside and suggests that voters on the right aren't really finding a pull factor for them that pulls them from voting for other right-wing parties. And if the Tories don't address that, it could consign them to oblivion at the next general election. Finally, does this result suggest a downturn for the Greens? It's fair to say that a lot of people did go into this election with quite high expectations for the Greens after their recent success in the North West at the Gorton and Denton by-election back in February. The former Green Party leader Caroline Lucas even said herself in an interview that she gave to the House magazine that her party would throw everything at the mayoral race, with a campaign which would be along the lines of their successful Gorton and Denton campaign. The reality is that support was down across the boroughs of Manchester for the Greens in comparison to the local elections in May, while Labour support rose across all boroughs. However, with Burnham's popularity here and the honeymoon period Labour are experiencing as a result, it could be argued that it was always quite a tall order for the Green Party to win this election. The Greens tend to perform better in urban centres, and they did just that when you look at the results across the boroughs. In the city of Manchester, the Greens still managed a strong second-place performance, despite their struggles in the other boroughs. The important thing to keep in mind when thinking about all of this, though, is that unless Andy Burnham calls an election himself, the next election could still be a long 3 years away. Right now, perhaps the biggest takeaway is that all the parties are trying to work out where they stand, and those who aren't in government are trying to work out the best ways to poke holes and criticise Andy Burnham's plans as our new Prime Minister. It begs the question though, will Labour be telling similar success stories when Parliament returns from parliamentary recess, when the honeymoon ends and Burnham begins to face the big choices that lie at Number 10's doorstep?